At the current stage, as we're reading, of Nichiren's lifetime, most of predominantly his early converts, those who had been under the auspices of government influenced political power, religions, so on and so forth. Most of the people that Nichiren converted early on with his doctrine of the Lotus Sutra, Shakyamuni's teachings of self-enlightenment, were not monks. They weren't previously adherents of particular schools as monks. They may have been practicing Buddhism, but they weren't practicing as monks. They were practicing as that was the religion of the country, right? So lots of landowners, merchants, samurai, people who, when they heard Nichiren speak of Shakyamuni's ultimate teachings, thought, there's something to gain here. This is really smart. And so those were his early converts. And we don't hear a lot about that from most, certainly sectarian schools or groups, private groups. We hear always about this converting Buddhists, changing the minds of Buddhists. But it's just a reminder again, two things. Number one, you don't have to come from Buddhism to learn Buddhism. And number two, Nichiren's life and his story really suits our time, because the world is filled with religions and, magical thinking. And the Lotus Sutra simply isn't that. Buddhism simply isn't that. If you know the goal from the outset to the Lotus Sutra of Buddhism, it's never magical, mystical. There's a lot of stories that talk about magical, mystical things, but those are expedient means because Shakyamuni was talking to people who were inculcated in cultures of magical, mystical thinking. But all of those stories are about bringing you back to reason, rationality. It's simply the purpose of Buddhism to live this life well, and that requires pragmatic, reasonable thought. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your practice. Thank you mostly for your practice and secondarily for your support. It is my mission, Sylvain here, your cohort in Buddhist practice, to provide the best, most correct transmission of Nichiren's doctrine, of Shakyamuni's teaching, of the Lotus Sutra and Buddhism in general, as a resource with the near 1,000 videos on this channel and the website, all free. The audio podcast available, the Buddhahood podcast. The bookstore, support materials there. Of course, there's you got to pay the printer, right? The mandala store to make sure you have a Nichiren inscribed mandala, not Bruce or Tom or Joe or Ikeda or whoever. We're following Nichiren's doctrine, not some authoritarian, right? I've talked about that ad nauseum. So by being here, by liking and subscribing, if you can, like our precious patrons, if you can support this channel with some financial aid once in a while or consistently, wow, we're all so appreciative for that. It allows us to keep the equipment running, to pay the internet bills, and so on and so forth. You understand. But even though it may seem like a small thing, liking and subscribing to this channel plays into the YouTube algorithms to do exactly what this effort is, to get correct information out and to support, to inspire, to keep your confidence as we practice. It's this very intensive practice. That's what it's all about. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Now, let's get back into the book. What am I talking about? Well, Mr. Anasaki is going to take us through this portion now of Nichiren's life where he's back from Izu. He's got his thinking has evolved now. It's not just him personally on a crusade, right? It's him personally, certainly, and even more convinced of that the more he studies and rereads the Lotus and other teachings, that the mission he's on is pretty singular, pretty narrow. It's actually an embodiment of something Shakyamuni talked about thousands of years before him. But now he's much more, how to say it, appreciative, gracious. He understands the nature of this great task of his. Says others aren't necessarily prepared to do, and yet in order to live their life fully and practice Buddhism correctly, they kind of need to emulate what he's now seeing his life is about. So he sees he doesn't see it as a burden. He sees it as the only way to live, but as he's inculcating these non-monks in his circle, these people haven't even been monks. They don't know what it is to commit their life to a certain way of thinking. And so he's being a little bit more gracious. Not gracious, what's the right word? Sympathetic. Empathetic. Right? As he teaches these students who look to him and think, man, you've really got that. You know what you're doing. You've got the answer. I want to learn from you. I want to do as you do. It's so important. It's so it makes so much sense. In that very act, they are saying, without the right words, you're liberating us from all the mysticism and the cloud of surveillance and lack of control we have over our own lives. You're handing us our lives back. Of course we want to follow you. And Nichiren looks on them and says, I'm awakening their Buddha nature. They don't fully grasp it or understand it yet, but I have to nurture these people. They are, after all, children of Buddha, yes? In the parlance. But he's gaining this sensitivity to those who would follow him in his path to correct practice of Buddhism. And I think it's important to note that the great bulk of his converts, his students, I don't like the word followers. That seems to be like a real Western, it's kind of a denigrating term. Well, I follow. None of us are followers. Buddhism doesn't call us followers. We adopt and we enact from the guidance of our great mentor, Nichiren. He's not a follower of Shakyamuni. He's an emulator, which is what the Lotus Sutra is. It's Shakyamuni saying, do as I have done. It's all yours. I can't give this to you. All I can do is point. You need to go there on your own, amongst friends, amongst like-minded people, but we're all individuals trying to live our lives fully. Nobody can do that for us. That's pretty strict. There's not many philosophies or countries for that matter, that you might say put the burden on you, but it's not a burden to be everything you can be. I know that sounds like very rhetorical statement, but truly, who's gonna live your life for you? If all you do all your time on earth is wait for others to open doors for you, well, I guess you could do that. I don't think that's very fulfilling, though. Most of us, living for a certain amount of time, get a little bored with waiting for people to do things for us. You just got to get up off your butt and go do it. And the amazing thing about that is, once we learn to do that, the sense of dignity, what Buddhism would call reward, that's unshakable. That's unique. Nobody can give us that reward, no matter how many trophies or gold stars you get. It's your sense of accomplishment that opens up your experience of life to something much more integral, much more life-like. There are areas in the United States, I've moved around a lot in my life, where I've seen children of parents who really don't care about them accomplishing anything. And I see those kids growing up with no sense of really dignity. They work, they're not invested in anything they do. I had a stepson like that, and I showed him, I was a little bit strict with him. I said, no. You're going to sign your name to that? You're taking pride in that? No. I remember he was barely 10 years old. It was about mowing the lawn. He was proud of the fact that he did it poorly. He said, well, that's how, I do the lawn. That's a me lawn. Oh, man, I wasn't going to tolerate that at all. I didn't punish him. I was strict with him. Take the mower back out, do this properly, and then look back on it with some pride and dignity that you were able to do something so well. He struggled with it because he wasn't accustomed to that kind of requisite. But it changed his life. I'm not exaggerating. Children want to be challenged, need to be challenged, if only to discover this amazing self-worth. Why do I say this? Because every time you chant Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, you are calling upon your maximal worth. What could be more important, more satisfying, more dignified than that? So all this rhetoric about Buddhism, about being the three bodies, manifest, reward, and Dharma, that's what it's about. That experience of living life bigger than this body can hold, that's Dharma. The amazing realization of feeling that's the reward. The manifestation is just samsara. It's just the same body from day to day. But this same body that the day before was sitting on its ass, not doing anything and waiting for people to do something for him or her, waiting for Savior, the following day, knowing, wow, it's great to be alive. My life is so amazing. Is that not reward? Is that not the experience of the Dharma? Yeah, Buddhism is real plain and in your face. There's no magic about it. And the people that were listening to Nichiren talk about it certainly thought, I want some of that. So, another interval lasting nearly 4 years followed the peril in the pine forest when he was attacked, and hit in the head with a sword. And it was a fruitful period in Nichiren's harvest of converts. Listen to the words, harvest of converts, like we're wheat. Basically, he was collecting a greater following of dedicated people who were interested in this life of reward, this sense of dignity. They weren't getting it from the government or their leaders or their religions. Religion's about keeping you down. You're not worthy. Maybe after you die. That's not Buddhism. Buddhism says right now, you're an incredibly important existence. Live it to the full. Wow, what a change of program. Yeah, tell me more. During these years, Nichiren went on missionary journeys in the eastern provinces and succeeded in converting many local lords. Oh, very important. Lords being landowners, people with some wealth, some influence, because they had great numbers of serfs, right? People working for them, whether it was agricultural or animal husbandry or just keeping the properties and the people fed and clothed, and it's like the head of a large community, right? Like a city leader, like a mayor. The first thing which strikes us in the results of his propaganda is that there were only a few among his disciples, his students, who had been Buddhist monks. Monks specifically. Everyone was a Buddhist, just like they say about the United States, everyone's a Christian. Not true, but you understand. But monks, that's a different story. Very few were monks. And that most of his students were recruited from among the warriors and feudal lords. Yeah, because they knew. The samurai knew they were being led to slaughter, basically, by people who were just interested in wealth and power. That didn't satisfy their inner dignity. So Nichiren comes along and teaches Buddhism correctly, and they think, oh, that's Buddhism. Yeah, give me some of that. Most of the warriors converted by him remained laymen and became the outside supporters of Nichiren. In other words, they didn't drop everything and just follow Nichiren around, or create monasteries where they could all go, because that's not really modern Buddhism. There are no monasteries or churches so much in Buddhism because it's an individual practice. You are your monastery. You know that intrinsically, don't you? But they dedicated themselves to the practice. Their brothers or sons who, after years of their novitiate, were ordained. Novitiate, there's a word we don't use anymore. Their novice practice, their learning practice. Some of them became ordained and became monks to not only follow Nichiren's teachings, doctrines, but to become teachers themselves. We have many letters we've read in Nichiren's Gosho sending out teachings, always teachings, but some quite profound, to those he would have disseminate the word amongst their local communities and students. That's the nature of propagation, right? And worked under the master in disseminating his doctrine. Well, what I just said. The first converts made by Nichiren, as we mentioned, were his parents. who were given the Buddhist names Myonichi and Myoren, respectively. Didn't write that sentence correctly. Meaning perfect sun and perfection lotus. The first monk disciple was Nisho, who had been the master's fellow student on Mount Hiei and had followed him to Kamakura. So this was a student of Nichiren's who saw him develop his own understanding and confidence in the Lotus Sutra, yeah? After this comes a list of converts from the warrior class or their sons and brothers, right, like Shidokingo. During the 4 years of which we are now speaking, there was a notable increase in numbers, and it was in the years before and after Nichiren's exile to Izu that his doctrine was planted in the provinces of Awa and Kazusa, which have been its stronghold down to the present time. This chapter may properly conclude with quotations from poems ascribed to the Prophet on these missionary journeys. Interesting. Have we ever heard of Nichiren's poems? It's the first time hearing of it. Outside pours the rain, and its drops strike the windows. Surely it is not thy own nature, or your own nature, O rain, that makes thee fall aslant. So he's looking at the rain, and he's noticing that the rain doesn't fall straight top to bottom; it goes at an angle. Is that the nature of rain? But no, he says, but the wind that causes the rain to beat so noisily on the sliding screens. So in this poem, he's talking about our natures and how we're influenced by the winds of propaganda and politics and influences around us. Our nature is clear as rain, and yet the rain is buffeted from side to side. That is poetic, yeah? Another one, my body is all wet with raindrops, again with the rain. Nay, but my own tears shed over calamities and perils. Now, he's talking about something more personal. His experience, like rain, is a lament of the condition of minds in his country. And yet, like an umbrella forest, I am sheltered, now, even on this dreary evening. What's the umbrella forest? The teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha, yeah? Myoho Renge Kyo. Let's see what the author says about it. These poems reflect the hardships he encountered everywhere and make us vividly imagine a poor monk clad in simple gray robes, with a little bag in his hands and a straw umbrella hat on his head, passing stormy nights in cottages or deserted shrines. The latter of the poems cited is said to have been written in a shrine dedicated to Kwannon at Kasamori, or Umbrella Forest, which stands today, marking the site. Interesting. That takes us into the next chapter. And we have plenty of time to get it started. This chapter, 5, is titled The Threatening Mongol Invasion and the Sentence of Death. While Nichiren was warning the nation of the possible calamity of a foreign invasion, the Mongol conquerors of the Asiatic continent were preparing for an expedition to the eastern islands. The Korean peninsula had already been subjugated, but the Hojo government did not yet fully realize the situation, although they must have had some knowledge of it. It is a question whether Nichiren had had any definite information when he wrote the warning essay in 1257, somewhere between 1257 and 1260 We've already talked about the Risho and Kokuran, right? At any rate, a panic was caused when, in 1268, an envoy from Kublai Khan, right, the Mongol emperor, was reported to be proceeding to Japan by way of Korea. This embassy had not reached Japan, but it was a triumph for Nichiren when in 1268 another envoy urged a definite answer to the Khan's demand for the payment of tribute, and the government and the people realized the gravity of this situation. Oh, he wasn't fooling around. Nichiren now went back to Kamakura and renewed his appeal to the government. See, it wasn't that Nichiren was going back to say, see, I told you, you leaders, you dummies. He was going back to the government to say, yeah, you leaders, you dummies, you're ruining the nation. You're killing the citizens. You're running Japan to ruin. And now we're all going to be Mongol subjects because you fail to understand how life works. Change your mystical thinking, your magical thinking. You can't just rattle your sword and win. Yep. Speaking of rain, I am sure you hear that. Recall my prophetic warning given 8 years ago, Nichiren says. It is not now being realized. Is it not now being realized? Is there any man besides Nichiren who can repel this national danger? Sounds, in this translation, it sounds pretty egotistical, but we understand it's what Nichiren was teaching, bringing to the fore, demonstrating in Shakyamuni's own words why this is happening and how it could be prevented. Only the one who knows the real cause of the situation can command it. He wasn't saying he was the only one who knew. He was saying all of you know it. You're just refusing to listen. Thus he argued. As this appeal remained unanswered, the prophet determined to take more radical measures. After 2 months, he sent letters to the high officials of the government and to the abbots of the great monasteries, urging them to abandon their former practices and to adopt Nichiren's doctrine of the Lotus Sutra, of Shakyamuni's teachings. To Nichiren, he wasn't inventing anything. He was saying, look, the answers are here. Pay attention. If you need help understanding, I can help. Let me help. There are 11 of these letters, each carrying its own special warning. At the same time, he sent a circular to his followers in which he says, quote, in consequence of the arrival of the Mongol envoy, I have sent 11 letters to the various officials and prelates. Prosecution will surely overtake Nichiren and his followers, and either exile or death will be the sentence. You must not be at all surprised. I'm asking for it. Strong remonstrances have intentionally been made simply for the purpose of awakening the people, the leaders, right? All is awaited by Nichiren with composure. I've done everything I could. I've said everything I could say. I'm waiting for a response. Do not think of your wives and children and households. Do not be fearful before the authorities, because there's surely going to be a reaction. Be prepared. Chant. Make this your opportunity to sever the fetters of births and deaths and to attain the fruit of Buddhahood. Chant. Don't let your fear overtake you. Don't sit there and think, oh, Nichiren, he's causing us so much trouble. No. Take the mantle, just like you and I. Let's be Nichiren. Let's stand firm on Buddhahood. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. That will give us protection. That will fortify our energy, our lives, our power. That is the only path in life. The author continues, all these letters are dated the 11th of the 10th month of November 16th in 1268, 8 months after the arrival of the Mongol envoy. We know nothing about the effect of the remonstrances, the remonstrations, Old English, I guess. But there are indications that the government authorities summoned some of Nichiren's warrior followers and examined their connection with Nichiren's propaganda. Like Shijo Kingo. Well, I point him out because we read a lot about this situation within the letters of encouragement that Nichiren was sending Shijo. And there were some moments in Kingo's life that were highly threatened by his lord, right? His boss. Meanwhile, Nichiren himself is believed to have left Kamakura, smart move, and to have been on a missionary journey during about 2 years after this event. This silence and retirement, if they're real, seem to have been a period of preparation for another and decisive step, which he contemplated for the purpose of remonstration and combat. And the psychological condition of Nichiren during this period may perhaps be compared to the retirement. Wow, I didn't see that coming. I've been warning you about the cultural inculcated rhetoric creeps in to these translations. But listen to this. And I'm not saying it's quite a stretch to compare Nichiren to Christ. Yeah. But what he's trying to say, obviously, is before his last entry into Jerusalem, what he's trying to say is Nichiren, now having remonstrated again with a government that's exiled him in the past for doing so, now is calling up people that Nichiren has influenced, samurai and others, and questioning them. Nichiren has left Kamakura. There's not a lot of information what his motives were, but I think it's clear what his motives were. He then set about the country on missionary journeys, bolstering people's resolve. Because he knew the shit was going to hit the fan. Right? So while he's doing all of this, he's preparing his students and spreading his education of Shakyamuni's Lotus Sutra. To compare that with... Anyway, I'm not going to waste any more time on it. At any rate, the writer, the author continues. It's kind of funny to me. Page turning karma. I haven't seen you in a while. Okay, here it is. Toward the end of 1270, we again see Nichiren in Kamakura. He comes back. So, what a compassionate thing to do. He sends out a letter. He goes, I've just poked the hornet's nest. And this is real. So he then goes house to house, land to land, province to province, shoring up people's confidence. For a couple of years he does this. And now that he feels confident that his students are getting the message, he goes back to Kamakura. What a compassionate person. He's not just railing for himself. I'm right, I'm right. Not at all. He's saying, I see something you people need to see. And the reaction is bound to be unpleasant. So let me go and shore up all my friends, all my students, all my fellow practitioners. They may not have the sense of mission that I do, but they should know they can get through this. I'll go make sure they're okay. I'll spend 2 years doing that. And then I'll go back to the fight before I disturb the hornets again. Make sure my students are prepared, because I'm not done. And in a letter dated the 28th of the 11th month, January 11th, 1271, we read his resolution as he was maturing his plans for the ensuing combat. Okay, this has to change. This will not stand. But before I take that step, let me go raise everyone's confidence. Then I'll come back. And now he's preparing. It says, quote, I was once exiled on account of my cause, my mission, the Lotus of Truth. Something seems still to be lacking until I shall be executed. Wishing, he didn't want to die, but he also recognized he hadn't been effective. He'd been silenced, and he had to counter that silencing. Of course, he wasn't silenced. He kept his mission going throughout the land, but he was convinced that in order to save Japan, he needed to turn the minds of the leaders. You guys are just not listening to me. How much evidence do you have to have? Wishing that this might happen, I sent a strong remonstration to various authorities. Not that it might happen that he be executed, but that it might happen that he changed some minds. That kind of revolution in the minds of the leaders might lead to his execution. But it wasn't the execution he wanted. It was the change of minds, right? Now my life has reached the 50th year. He was 50 years old. Why should I expect to live very much longer? I've lived a full life. I've taught all of you. I've spread this teaching. Now I need to ensure the future. And if it costs me my life for the Lotus Sutra, it's an honorable death. I could see him thinking that. Let me dedicate this life then, with you, to the unique truth of the Lotus, the bodily life which is destined once finally to be abandoned in an uncultivated field. Right? When this life is over, we're food for worms. In the following summer of 1271, we find him engaged in a contest with other Buddhists in a ritual against a drought. Remember all the stories we read about that Nichiren wrote? These Nembutsu and Zen and so forth, praying to the skies for rain. Magic. And Nichiren railed against that. To the leaders, what are you doing? Here's your stupidity again, your foolishness. Raise your dignity, raise your life. Amo-myo Renge-kyo, with that kind of energy, amassing that kind of dharma, then surely if we need rain, it'll happen. That's a very different mindset. After this, events moved rapidly, leading to a sentence of death pronounced upon the aggressive prophet. They were fed up. Look, we tried to just let you noise yourself out in the wilderness, but now you're attacking us, our governance, our method of spiritual dedication. You're questioning our magic. Sending you to Izu wasn't enough to make you docile? We'll see about that. When Nichiren reappeared in Kamakura, the hatred of the rival Buddhists toward him was implacable. See, it wasn't the samurai that were going after him. It wasn't even the government. It was the ministries. It was these other loony Buddhists. You're making us look bad. Shut up. Especially Ryokwan, the abbot of Gokuraku-ji. We read about that in the Go Show. And the greatest philanthropist of the time, being incensed by Nichiren's fierce proclamation, charged him with disturbing the public order and demanded a retraction from him. Take back what you've said, or else. Nichiren defended himself against the charges and challenged his opponent to a public debate. Come on, Ryokan. You think you're so smart? Let's talk about Buddhism. Ryokan was revered by the nobility and the people as the greatest teacher of Buddhist discipline and was regarded as an incarnation of the Buddha, whatever the name, or medicine master. Because of his care for the sick and infirm, and a man of such high position as the abbot of a monastery endowed by the government, was deemed to be too dignified to enter a public debate with a beggar like monk. Can you imagine? This is the Jerry Falwell of Japan. I'm far too elevated to listen to the annoying little monk. Go on now. Yeah, he's scared shitless, yeah. Then in the summer, the country suffered from a long drought, and when the Ryokan's mystic ritual seemed to be fruitless and to bring a rainfall, Nichiren vehemently accused the former of being a vain hypocrite. He wanted a fight. He wanted a fight not because Nichiren wanted to win against this poser, but he wanted it to set an example to follow. See, Nichiren was combative, but not for his own ego. He was combative against these formidable foes, these evils who were thwarting and polluting Buddhism, Shakyamuni's teachings. He simply wasn't going to tolerate it. Intrigue against Nichiren was going on behind the scenes among the court ladies of the Hojo, who were all admirers of Ryokan. So they were plotting. Public accusations were also made from various sides. At last, on the 10th of the 9th month, October 15th, 1271, Nichiren was called into the court to explain himself. Okay, you asked for it. Now we'll have the bullies of Japan, the governors of Japan, not the religious leaders, who stand aside and go, defend me. He declared that his accusers were all great liars and repeated his warning about the imminent Mongol invasion to the same effect as his previous utterances. They listened to, here he goes again. Oh, this is tiring. Why won't he shut up? The man who was most offended and irritated was Heino Saimon, the major domo of the Hojo clan. Shijo Kingo's boss, right? A fervent believer in Amita Buddhism, Nembutsu. 2 days later, while the question was still pending in the court, Nichiren sent to him an essay, directly to him, the Risho and Kokuran, together with a letter almost amounting to an ultimatum. The breach was too wide to be closed. The critical moment was at hand. He pushed hard, and then he pushed again, and he located the most incensed, vehement opposition, a powerful lord, and went at him directly. Fearless. On the morning of the same day, the 12th, probably while Nichiren's ultimatum was still on the way, a body of troops led by Major Domo himself surrounded Nichiren's hut. You in there? He hadn't even received it yet, the Rishan Kokuran. Nichiren stood on the veranda with the rolls of the scriptures in his hand, holding his copy of the Lotus Sutra. The soldiers hesitated to attack him, but he made no resistance. Here I am. When the soldiers finally seized him, he loudly exclaimed, "Behold, the pillar of Japan is now falling." He was tried before the Supreme Court on the charge of high treason. The judgment was immediately pronounced, and it seems to have been a sentence of banishment, but his life was left to the mercy of the custodian, Nichiren's opponent himself, Hachiman. We're banishing him again, but if you want to kill him, no big deal. A method of disposing of cases not unusual in that age. We won't sully our hands. We don't want him around anymore. Do with him as you will. If you kill him, well, it's on you. But no problem. Won't perturb us. Ah, government. In the evening, the prisoner was carried around on horseback in the city, and late in the night he was carried to Tatsu-no-kutchi, the dragon's mouth, the execution ground, about 2 miles from Kamakura. So first of all, they exhibited this guy's done. You see this guy, Nichiren, you've been listening to? Yeah, he's done. We're going to take him out of town and rip his head off. As he passed the red bridge in the middle of the town, he commanded the guard to stop. Really? Nichiren, a man to be beheaded, paraded around as an enemy of Japan? He commands all of Hachiman's troops to stop? First of all, pretty bold. Secondly, did it work? While the amazed soldiers obeyed and the crowd were wondering what was going to happen, the giant monks dismounted from the horse and stood facing north toward the sanctuary of Hachiman, right, an old inculcated deity of Japan, a protector. Hachiman, or the Eight Banners deity, was the patron deity of the Minamotos, and a significant temple dedicated to him was erected at Kamakura when it was the seat of the dictatorial government. It ever remained the holiest sanctuary of the military headquarters and the dictator's residence. So the retinue of samurai that were taking him to be beheaded, who all stopped when he commanded them, probably wondering why they themselves had done it, there must have been, remember, most of his converts were lords and samurai. And they all thought something about this maybe isn't right. I don't know, I wasn't there. But Nichiren, quite a clever politician himself, faces Hachiman's sanctuary, which is the holiest place for the samurai in their minds, in their lives, yeah? The Red Bridge was on the great avenue running through the middle of the city, from the front of the Hachiman temple to the seashore. There the prisoner monk stood, and fixing his gaze on the seat of this worshipped shrine, spoke thus, quote, "O Hachiman." Really? Are you really a divine being? What? When the great Master Dengyo gave lectures on the Lotus of Truth, did you honor him, offering a purple robe? Now I, Nichiren, am the one, the Supreme One who lives the life of the Lotus of Truth. There is no fault in me, but I am proclaiming the truth simply in order to save all the people of this country from falling down to the nethermost hells because they're degrading the Lotus of Truth. Should the Mongols subjugate this country, wouldn't you, O Hachiman, together with the sun goddess alone, be safe? Moreover, when our Lord Shakyamuni revealed the Lotus of Truth, all the Buddhas came together from the 10 quarters, and when innumerable hosts, including the deities and saints of India, China, and Japan, were present in the congregation, each of you took an oath to guard those who should work to perpetuate the truth. Now you ought to come here and fulfill your oath. And why do you not? When tonight I, Nichiren, shall be beheaded and go to the paradise of Vulture Peak, to the truth of the Lotus. That sermon, yeah? The treasure tower. I shall declare before the Lord Shakyamuni that you, Hachiman, and the sun goddess have not fulfilled your oaths. Are you not afraid of that? What an intriguing speech. Using the mythology of the Japanese culture, certainly of the samurai that were surrounding him, he was rattling the very core of their sensibilities as Japanese warriors, yeah? Where are we time-wise? All right. One more paragraph and we'll stop. Then Nichiren mounted his horse and rode dignifiedly on, like, got to say my piece again. But to the people that really matter to me, the soldiers and the crowd were amazed, and everyone was questioning with himself. Is he mad, or is he really a Superman? Superstitious awe was mingled with high admiration. Pity and sympathy were displaced by the thought, what an extraordinary audacity! The sign of a supernatural power, right? He's either crazy or there's merit to what he says. Everyone was pretty rattled. Along the road on which Nichiren's guard proceeded, many of his believers wept and cried, some of them daring even to approach him. He took farewell of them, either in silence or with a word of consolation. It's okay, it'll be all right. The faithful warrior Kingo was there, together with his brothers, accompanied his master to the execution ground, and Nichiren later expressed his high appreciation for their fidelity unto death. Most of Nichiren's monk disciples had been arrested and imprisoned, and to them, after his miraculous escape from death, he wrote consoling letters. It was some time past midnight when Nichiren arrived at Tatsu-no-kutchi, and I'm going to leave you on that cliffhanger. We should make a movie out of this, yeah? I wonder if we could amass enough donations, because I went to UCLA Film School. I actually have a film in the can I never released. I've got pieces of it on the internet. This would be a much grander project, though. Wow. Let me know what you think of that. Maybe with our Sangha, with our patrons, we could raise enough money to put a simple film together. No big Hollywood production, but something of merit that we could publish. Wow, wouldn't that be something? Woo! Dare to dream big, Sylvain. Namo Myo Renge Kyo. Look, your practice means everything. Just as Nichiren is pointing out. Namo Myo Renge Kyo. Thank you. Thank you for being a Buddhist, a real Buddhist. shoring up your practice, sharing these videos, like, subscribe, please. I'm itching to read the remainder of this, but I'm going to keep away from it so I can enjoy it along with you, all right? Tatsu-no-kutchi. Namo Myo Renge Kyo. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your health. Be steadfast in your practice. It's so worthy of you. And you worthy of it, yes? Live your life to the full. And I'll see you in the next one. Namo Myo Renge Kyo. Bye for now. Myo.